And welcome everybody. So this is the first in a new series of live interviews here with the New Zealand Health and Safety Professionals group, and also on my own LinkedIn profile, bringing you subject matter experts in the broad and diverse world of health and safety. Today we are joined by Liz May, who has over 20 years experience in the food and grocery industry. Liz is passionate about providing health and safety leadership to the retail and supply chain industry. Her key focuses include risk, human behavior, employee education, information and empowerment. And established in July 2019, and with the support of ACC and major retail industry members, she is the CEO of Shopcare, which represents the retail and supply chain sector with the purpose of delivering leadership and driving long-term positive change. So Liz, welcome to this session.
Thank you, Matt. I'm really thrilled to be here. Good afternoon, everybody.
It's great to have you as the first guest interview in this new series that we're putting out here today. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we did a series during the COVID-19 lockdown where we tried to bring people who were out in the field doing first response, working through level 4, level 3, and also taking advice from subject matter experts in the legal field, helping us to try and piece together how best to respond to this. Now, I know we'll definitely be touching on Shopcare's response to COVID-19, which from my own point of view was quite spectacular. But I guess where I'd like us to start today is discovering a little bit more about you, Liz. So your background, you worked for Progressive Enterprises for over 20 years. With the final 3 years as the GM for logistics at Countdown. So with that experience, what do you see as some of the greatest health and safety challenges within the industry?
Good first question, Matt. Thank you for that. Look, I think there's a number. The one that's pretty dearest to my heart is the sometimes lack of focus on the things that are most likely to seriously hurt or kill somebody. So a lot of businesses know what those critical risks are, but perhaps sometimes they don't live and breathe them every day. That may become over time a bit of a tick box exercise. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, I think, in health and safety in New Zealand at the moment. Because really on a bad day, as we know, when those layers of Swiss cheese line up and the holes line up, then someone can very easily be seriously hurt or killed. And just because it hasn't happened in the last 30 years and you've been doing it that way for 30 years, it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for yourself, like what brought the keen interest into health and safety? Was there a particular experience, or what was it that brought Liz May to focus in on health and safety?
In fact, it probably really attached to the answer of my previous question.
Yes.
My interest has grown over time, definitely grown over time. And I am honest enough to say that probably 10 or 15 years ago that I thought safety was really boring. And but now I love it and live it with a passion in terms of the opportunity to change people's lives. Yeah. I had a number of, in fact, I had 14 different roles in my time at Countdown, so I saw a lot of diversity across the business. In my last role, in fact, I was 8 days into my last role, and I got a phone call, and it's a phone call as a leader or a health and safety manager or a supply chain manager that you never want to get, that one of your team has been seriously hurt. And this is all public record. And I can remember that moment, and I'll remember it forever. And it was 2 in the morning. I remember that vividly, looking at the clock. And when I got that phone call that morning, and to hear that, my first thought was, thank heavens that the person's not going to die. And then my second thought was, actually, this can be the thing. This can be the thing that can really change safety, and I can use this to change safety, not just in our own business, but really across the industry. Yeah. And because it does happen, those holes in the Swiss cheese do line up. And bad things happen, regardless of the fantastic work that people put in every day to make sure they don't. And that was a huge change for me in my career. What I also realised, and if I look to my left or right, I'm looking out the window, so I sometimes do that when I get a bit thoughtful, so excuse me. But to have great safety, you need to have good processes and procedures. You need to have great leadership. You need to have great training. You need engaged team. And if you have all of those things, not only do you have great safety, but actually you have a great business as well. So the two are so intertwined. It's unbelievable. And because if you get one bit right, you'll have a fantastic business as well. And unfortunately, not everybody gets that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so today we find you as the CEO of Shopcare. So would you like to tell us a little bit about how Shopcare came to be?
I'd love to tell you. So Shopcare was born out of a very long-standing Food and Grocery Council safety working group. And that safety working group had been running for just over 5 years, or in fact probably 6 years now, run by some really dedicated people, but of course they were doing it as part of their day job. So kind of a bi-monthly, quarterly meeting for a couple of hours. And they did some really good things. But what they also realised over time is that really to make a difference, then you need dedicated resource. That, a couple of hours in a meeting and a few hours here or there trying to get initiatives done really wasn't going to make a distinctive change. So a couple of great people on that group. So Jerry Lynch, CEO Dalmain, Mike O'Brien, who was the head of SHEP and now independent chair of HASANZ, got together and say, actually, there's an opportunity to create our own organisation that's funded with employed people whose job it is to improve health and safety in retail and supply chain. Coincidentally, it was about that time that I left my role at Countdown. I had some time off. And during that time off, I helped Mike put together a proposal to ACC for some funding as part of their TFI grant process. So we're both funded by ACC and by the industry. So some wonderful large industry members also fund us to pay for our small team here and also the initiatives that we run. So that was officially started just over a year ago, and we officially launched at the end of October last year.
Yeah, fantastic. And so can you describe to us some of the key priorities and maybe perhaps the vision of Shopcare?
Coincidentally, I was saying to the team, right, what do I need? I need some mints. So in case I lose my voice, I need to go and get the mints out of the car. So I did that. So excuse me.
No, it's all good.
So yes, I can. So we just reviewed all of our strategy and our priorities for the coming year.
Yes.
So our vision statement is connecting for healthier workplaces. So there's a couple of parts to that, and we talked about this for probably an afternoon about what's the core of what we want to do. So for healthier workplaces is obvious, but the connecting piece is about connecting people together and connecting people to solutions. Because I know that the vast majority of issues that the industry faces has already been solved somewhere else before. So if we can connect people to people and people to solutions, then businesses are going to save a whole lot of time and money because the problem's already been found. The answer to the problem's already been found before. So hence the connecting for healthier workplaces. So that's our vision, our purpose. And I'm reading this, make sure I get the words right. Shopcare aims to accelerate the reduction of work-related death, injury and ill health in retail and supply chain. So again, some purposely chosen words around aiming to accelerate the reduction.
Yeah.
We are what's called a health and safety sector group. So we look after a sector. There are a number of other sector groups as well. So there's HASANZ that some folk may have heard of. They look after the construction sector. There's FISC, who look after the forestry sector. There's HAG, who look after the agricultural sector, and there's also a government sector group, and there's a couple of other sector groups that are currently being formed as well. And certainly when we formed, we said that we wanted a name rather than an abbreviation, hence we've ended up with Shopcare. What we do, when I try to succinctly in one sentence, it's about providing leadership and coordination. So leadership in the industry, and that will come in all sorts of ways, and coordination. So we'll health and safety focused, not diverted by anything else, with connections into many parts of the industry. And if we can provide that coordination and leadership, where there is no other party that does that. It's not really WorkSafe's place, they're the regulator, it's not really ACC's place, but we can take that place because we're all people that come from the industry and actually know what it means to work and live and breathe the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. We caught up a couple of days ago just to make sure all the tech and all the magic we've got going on here worked, and you raised my attention to Dr. Claire Tedestet's George's research.
She's
a researcher.
Yeah,
it's great. So she's a researcher. She's based at AUT University. She works at the Research Institute there, and she did a PhD thesis which focused on the transportation sector, with a key focus, I suppose, with the health and safety impacts that the industry has on the people involved in that industry. So it turned into some 6-year research, which sounds like created an absolute stack of findings, interviewing the men and women all the way up and down the supply chain, from the C-suite and the board and the executive, down to the men and women in the trucks and vehicles that are taking our goods from one end of the country to the next. And the findings were quite damning. I imagine this would have had an impact on yourself, but also will be a driving force for Shopcare moving forward. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, look, it is, Matt, and transport's dear to my heart. It's been a big part of my last role. In fact, what Shopcare does is split into two. So we do a lot of work specifically on retail and supply chain. So that's managed by Wes Van Deventer, who's one of the team, then Catherine Ross looks after transport. And we've got some pretty ambitious aspirations around transport. So where we're heading is that we want to, again, connect the industry together, and for people in the transport industry, and not just transport, but you've got supply chain that feed into that, for that group to bring them together to agree that something needs to change in transport. WorkSafe have also recently funded some research in this area, and don't be bored by the research work, it's actually a fantastic piece of work. So really understanding what are the upstream factors. A lot of the issues in transport and in safety kind of pop out at the very lowest worker level, but this piece of research is about looking at those very high level. Is it regulatory? Is it business contracts? Is it road infrastructure? What are those really high level issues that ultimately pop out in drivers being hurt and other people on the road being hurt? So really, really exciting piece of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we were just talking before we went live today, and how I was just reflecting on how often I start in my capacity as a consultant with a new business, working through where they currently stand. And often the starting point is simply looking at their hazards and risks and identifying what really is the urgent work that needs to be done first, and prioritizing and putting the resources into the best places. Now, I imagine that Shopcare will be doing a similar piece of work around identifying the risks and hazards within industry. Is that again, is that something that is on the cards?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're doing a very specific piece of work. So within transport, we're looking at what are all of the transport risks, and that's going to be fascinating to see what they are that can then contribute to potentially that charter, and again sharing solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And then within retail and supply chain, looking specifically at critical risks, so the risks that are most likely to seriously hurt or kill somebody. It's actually been really fascinating, Matt, as we've asked people for their critical risks, and we've had some businesses be able to come back to us with a flash, with a great PowerPoint around here's our critical risks and here's our bow tie analysis. Others, not so much. So the conclusion that we've actually come to is that there's a large number of businesses that actually haven't necessarily identified what those risks are that are most likely to seriously hurt or kill somebody. They may have a risk register that may have 10 items on or 30 or 60 items on, but not those ones that are most likely to seriously hurt someone. So it's really going to be just fascinating over time as we get a greater contribution. And if anyone's listening today, and the more businesses that we have that we know what your risks are, and it's all anonymous and confidential when we amalgamate it all, then the better handle that we're going to have on what risks are. And the next step from that is how do we actually share the solutions? So again, it's all been invented before. We do have we've got an initial view of what critical risks are in the industry. I'm putting you on the spot now, Matt. Do you want to have a stab about what they might be?
Okay, critical risks. Well, I imagine we'll be looking at road use, so the transportation side of things. People versus vehicles. The maintenance of equipment or lack of.
Yes.
I imagine things, fatigue, stress, anxiety, drug, alcohol issues. And then also when you've got overlapping duty holders, so the contractor management piece would be absolutely massive. It was really interesting reading the thesis that I mentioned earlier, is that all of those things just kept cropping up time and time again, where at the very end of that food chain, the individual contractors who are behind the steering wheels of those trucks ultimately are left with very little choice but to go above and beyond just to make ends meet, which is it's pretty tragic actually.
So it's certainly one way that people can get involved with Shopcare is that, as I said, love to hear the more businesses that we've got who can contribute their critical risks, the better picture that we're going to get. It's going to be fascinating over the next 1, 2, 5, 10 years to track that, how hopefully our country's maturity around understanding those serious risks, how that evolves over time. And we hope that we know that Shopcare will play a big part in that.
Yeah, wonderful. So for those listening live and for those tuning in with our after event recordings who would like to offer their insight and input into the hazards and risks that they are aware of, where would be the best place for them to go?
So our website's whizzing along the bottom, but love to hear from you directly. So it's liz@shopcare.org.nz. Pretty simple. Visit shopcare.org.nz or Wes, W-E-S, or Catherine at shopcare.org.nz.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, at the start of the interview, I reflected on how this interview series first kicked off. So, with the New Zealand Health and Safety Professionals group, there's some 1,000 members on Facebook and over several hundred members on LinkedIn. During the lockdown period, we ran a series of interviews with subject matter experts, trying to get as much information out to those who are part of this group as we possibly could. And likewise, I'm aware and know that Shopcare did some quite sterling work during that period. Would you like to describe how Shopcare responded and some of the materials and outputs that you managed to get out there?
Yeah, I'd love to, Matt. Gosh, it wasn't a strange time for everybody. Here one day, home the next, flat out on the phone. So we had a outstandingly busy, particularly that level 4 and level 3 period. So
Yes.
we provided the Food and Grocery Council quite a lot of support. So we managed all of their Zoom phone calls, which had up to over 200 CEOs and business leaders looking at weekly briefings with different speakers and that kind of thing. We also are pretty very proud of, we developed the protocols for all of retail stores as they went from level 4 to level 3. So the protocol was the guidance document that retail stores followed to be able to operate at level 3 and then operate at level 2. And that was not a small piece of work, as you can imagine. So really proud of that piece of work. And it didn't matter that it actually only lasted a couple of weeks for each of the sets, but it'll be there forever. And if anyone's interested in having a look, the last version, the level 2 version, is still available on our website for your interest.
Great.
We also produced some coordinated retailers and between retailers and produced some guidance for merchandisers. Merchandisers are an incredible group of people. There's about 12 to 15,000 merchandisers who operate, particularly in the food and grocery sector in New Zealand, and they kept on working right through level 4 and level 3, and of course they were in 4, 5, 6 stores every day. And so we coordinated some guidance and support for merchandisers during that time. And the other thing that Wes and Catherine in particular worked on was around working with Safe 365, that I know you know a lot about, Matt, to develop some an app. So Safe 365 developed an app, and the app was about, you go in, answer some questions, and you go in every day, answer some questions, and that helped let your business know whether you were healthy that day or not. And also there was support around working from home and some checklists around working from home. So we turned that around within a week, which was just incredible work by Wes and Catherine and the team at Safe 365 to do that. But it was great to be able to contribute and Matt, we did all sorts of things through that times, from kind of very strategic. We were on a working group with MB and government, to really quite tactical. I was had quite a few conversations with reps and merchandisers and all sorts. So we were just keen and happy to help in whatever way we could from our bubble in the spare room.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal output considering the circumstances. So I mean, congratulations to you and the team. The material that you produced, I was thoroughly impressed with, and the checklists and materials that between yourselves and Safe 365 produced, again, brilliant, and continues to be used and is very valuable to lots of people out there, which is great.
And they're all free, and it's still available to use. And again, you can have a look on our website if you're interested.
Yeah, fantastic. So reflecting on perhaps how the industry responded and some of the top learnings and takeaways, is there anything that springs to mind that's worth sharing today?
Look, a couple of things. First thing is, I don't think we'll really understand the impact for quite some period of time. I think this is going to be clearly a long game, not just internationally, but what the ongoing impact is. But the feedback that we've had is actually around mental health and fatigue. It's actually the biggest impact that people are talking to us about, whether it be for you yourself, whether it be concern for your family members, about a job, about health, about the situation itself. Quite wide and varied, but that's one of the key pieces that we've had feedback about. During the time, one of the issues was around mixed messages. So that was another big piece of feedback around, if we do this again, that we don't want to do, but if we had to do it again, then albeit that some fantastic people did a great job very quickly, how do we get greater clarity to businesses quicker? Was the other key piece of feedback.
Yeah, and I imagine it's probably positioned Shopcare in a great space too. Obviously, this has all been thrown at us, and we've had to respond as best we can. But clearly, it's positioned you as and the team as a conduit, a space to get advice from a single source of truth, and getting a bit of consistent messaging through it, which would only have been very invaluable to members and beyond. That's it's fantastic. Clearly a valuable thing. So from those learnings, from the discovery that the mental health and well-being side of things is clearly raised its head, does Shopcare have any thoughts about how it can respond to that particular focus?
Look, we're going to be talking to the Mental Health Foundation, and there is a lot of information out there around mental health in particular, and the opportunity for us is back to the kind of connecting people to solutions. We don't have to invent the solutions. Some of the things as time will go on, we will be, but how do we connect people to the right solutions and let people build their awareness of what is actually already out there? Because there's been some fantastic work and a lot of resources just on that one topic itself.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think your point also is important to remember too, is that often the experts are those out there doing it day in, day out, and which brings me quite neatly to the piece of work that WorkSafe and others have been working on of late, which is the good practice guidelines around site traffic, which I understand Shopcare has been well and truly involved in, and I believe it's still open to public submissions at the moment.
It is. So it looks like this is my copy that I've written, started to write feedback on. So it's not too long, but it's a large topic, but such an important topic. There are people that die and are seriously hurt every year in New Zealand because of issues with managing worksite traffic. So it's still open for another week. Absolutely love to give more people the opportunity to provide feedback. So WorkSafe asked us to work with the industry and get as much feedback as possible. And what we're finding is that virtually every piece of feedback that we get, somebody picks up something different, because somebody's got different experience and other people have different history, different business. So I love to. And what will happen next is that WorkSafe will go through quite a review process, and they'll be won't be implemented until 2021. But for anyone that has the opportunity to review them, they'll also give you a bit of a sneak peek in terms of what the WorkSafe guidelines will be. And what WorkSafe will use them for is that when an inspector goes on site, this will be what the inspector refers to, and also if a business has any questions about, well, how do I do something? I'm not doing it right, but how do I do it? They will refer the business to these guidelines.
Yeah.
And we'll also be working with WorkSafe on how they're implemented. So you'll be hearing more about that.
Okay, interesting. Watch this space. I love that, because basically what it's doing is helping to define what good looks like in an area that's clearly needed. So I guess it leads me to wanting to know where to from here for Shopcare. What's the plans for the foreseeable?
Well, look, we're really excited, Matt. So we've just done a strategy review, as I said. So we've got some clear objectives for the coming year, and some of that's been influenced by COVID. At the same time, though, we're pretty flexible and need to be flexible to things that may come up. So some key pieces of work, the WorkSafe guidance around managing site traffic, absolutely key piece of work for us to be involved in. Really keen for this to be really successful. We know that these guidelines, if taken into account, will save lives and save a lot of serious injuries and save a lot of businesses a lot of money if these are implemented. And so we've got a big piece of work around that. And again, just email me or one of the team or connect through the website, and love to send you a copy of those proposed guidelines to be involved in that. The critical risk piece of work. We've also, interestingly, doing quite a bit of work on a glossary of terms. So we also run some industry working groups, and those working groups cover in-store safety, manual handling, mobile plant and equipment, and transport, of course. But one of the early pieces of feedback that we got from the industry was that we all call things different names, and it's a real problem. So it's actually a problem in the working group because people call things different names. But also imagine if you're a team member and you move from company A to company B to company C, and you're faced with all of these different terms. So really, it was pretty an unexpected piece of work that we needed to do, was to develop a glossary of terms. So love for some feedback on those as well. But again, not that, we're not expecting the whole industry to suddenly change their terminology, but if because many businesses, of course, are driven internationally by what they call things, but if we want to get to a point that the industry knows that this thing is called a pen rather than a pencil or whatever else you might call it, then that's actually going to help everybody, but most of all help the team on the floor as they transition, which makes talking to each other, connecting people easier, and will keep people safer.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's an invaluable piece of work. I'm just thinking, even from my focus is traditionally been in the construction space, and it's very much the same, where a piece of equipment can be called 3 or 4 different things, and it can actually lead to confusion and worst case scenario, preventable harm. So it's going to be a very useful piece of work. So obviously people can get involved by emailing you, taking a look at the website. Are there any, it's probably quite difficult to say at the moment, particularly in the world that we find ourselves, but will Shopcare be at any up and coming events, or any stalls or anything like that you're aware of?
We're hoping to be at next year's Safeguard Forum. And that's really all we've got planned at the moment. But we're increasing our presence as the days and weeks go on. So if you follow us on LinkedIn, then or connect to us, and we'll put you on I call it our keeping people up to date list. So connect with us and we'll put you on that list and keep you up to date. But also we want people involved in what we're doing, and the feedback is just so critical. So desperately want to hear from you in terms of what's going on in your business, because that's only going to make a better solution in the end. But that's the only specific forum we've got planned at the moment.
Yeah, it's probably a bit unfair of me asking, because it is so uncertain at the moment, but that's great to hear that you'll be there, and I'm sure many of the viewers will be there too. Looking forward to it. Excellent.
I think the other thing that's happened, Matt, and you would have seen it as well, that with everyone going on Zoom, and we all landed on Zoom within a couple of days. In fact, I heard of one business who were planning a 2-year rollout to get to the point of people being able to work from home, and they did it in 3 days because they had to. Anyway, we've all landed in Zoom land, so I think, and it's actually quite normal now. So doing more of these kind of things is actually an easy thing to do. You don't have to drive anywhere. You don't lose all of that time. You can just sit at your desk, hop in and hop out whenever you want.
Yeah, I love that. So there you go. It's going to be a nimble, agile organization, bringing quality information and support to an industry that clearly needs it. So for what it's worth, I'd love to take a moment just to congratulate yourself and to the team for the wonderful achievements that you've done in such a short space of time, and I wish you all the world of success for the years ahead. So for those tuning in who want to get involved or want to at least know a little bit more about Shopcare, there's the website address at the bottom there, and then Liz has obviously kindly put forward her email address too. So a very open and transparent organization, and I strongly recommend people to get involved with. So thank you so much for your time today, Liz. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Can I come back again, Matt?
I would love you to. Yeah, absolutely.
And give you an update in a few months, or perhaps if I'd love to come back, perhaps in the new year, and talk about managing worksite traffic and what that means for people.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. It's such an important piece. I'm spending more and more time these days in manufacturing spaces, and there seems to be a real uncertainty as to how to work safely around mobile plant and machinery, and anything like that is going to be so valuable. So yes, let's make it happen.
Great. Thanks, man. Thanks, everyone.
Alrighty.